In this age of hyper-partisan politics in America, it is very easy for Christians who strongly identify with one political party to be engaged in partisan behavior too. They are often forced to choose sides, often in Christian environments, which should ideally be a safe space for Christians and indeed people of all backgrounds. For instance, during one sermon in a church that I know, a much loved pastor spent some time talking about truth in politics. During that same sermon, I initially got the impression that the pastor would take both political parties, in addition to possibly others, to task. After all, truth and politicians generally don't seem to go together, or at least that hasn't been the case lately. So, considering that this was an opportunity to speak truth to power, regardless of political affiliation, it disappointed me to see this beloved pastor miss a golden opportunity and instead take the side of a Republican politician while using very Republican-friendly talking points. Somehow, since I don't think the pastor was being deceitful, it appeared that the pastor really believed what he was saying and had convinced himself that said Republican politician was being targeted by the media and the Democrats. Likewise, in another Christian institution that I am familiar with, there is a person who works there who would rather watch Fox News because it is far friendlier to our current president, unlike CNN, which, according to that same person, had far more negative things to say about our current president. Now, to be fair, there could be different reasons why many Christians support Republicans, and those reasons might not necessarily apply to the individuals I mentioned earlier. But these instances did raise an interesting question. Could it be possible, however painful that realization might be, that many Christians who are supposed to aspire to a higher standard of truth are looking for news media, political parties, and candidates that simply reinforce their pre-existing biases? If so, these Christians may be engaging in the very human and not necessarily Christian tendency known as confirmation bias. So what is confirmation bias? One source refers to confirmation bias as the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or strengthens one's prior personal beliefs or hypotheses. Psychology Today describes this further. When people would like a certain idea or concept to be true, they end up believing it to be true. They are motivated by wishful thinking. This error leads the individual to stop gathering information when the evidence gathered so far confirms the views or prejudices one would like to be true. Once we have formed a view, we embrace information that confirms that view while ignoring or rejecting information that casts doubt on it. Confirmation bias suggests that we don't perceive circumstances objectively. We pick out those bits of data that make us feel good because they confirm our prejudices. Thus, we may become prisoners of our assumptions. In other words, you might read an article that confirms something about a politician you don't like, but when you share the same article with a friend who thinks differently and supports that politician you don't like, that friend may think that the article, on the other hand, completely vindicates said politician. On a related note is the psychological state known as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance refers to a situation involving conflicting attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. This produces a feeling of mental discomfort leading to an alteration in one of the attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors to reduce the discomfort and restore balance. What happens when you're in discomfort? You are going to try to reduce the discomfort, right? Similarly, for example, some smokers may continue to smoke despite being aware of the adverse health effects of tobacco. So, the path one chooses may not always be the right one. In fact, per this article here, there are at least 3 different ways by which one can try to resolve cognitive dissonance. The first way, in fact, is something I fear many people, especially die-hard Republicans and Democrats, are prone to. Number 1, rejecting or avoiding conflicting information. Often, people resolve cognitive dissonance by devaluing and discarding conflicting knowledge. They may limit their exposure to new information that does not align with their existing beliefs, a phenomenon called confirmation bias. One example of this is devaluing particular news sources by describing them as biased or false. Does that sound familiar? Bye-bye CNN. I don't like what you're saying. You must be wrong. Or, on the other hand, bye-bye Fox News. You guys are all biased. Unfortunately, this tendency to disregard opposing viewpoints is something that I sadly expect to continue, because one's tendency in the case of cognitive dissonance that he or she will choose the alternative that produces less discomfort. And it is certainly more comforting to be in the company of people who are agreeable. Number 2, persuading and justifying. Individuals may persuade themselves that no conflict exists. They may seek out support from others who share similar beliefs, or try to convince others that the new information is inaccurate. So much like the individual I described earlier, it is easier to go and watch a channel like Fox News and never watch CNN because it provides the viewpoints of like-minded individuals. Number 3, reconciling the differences. This method of reducing dissonance may be the most effective, but it is also the most challenging to implement. It involves a person changing their behaviors so that they are consistent with their other beliefs. Reconciling the differences between conflicting beliefs or between actions and beliefs is a form of personal growth. So, let's just say you're a conservative Christian who believes that Christians should love everyone. But when it comes down to it, you just can't help but hate those darn liberals and progressives. How does the action here of hating liberals and progressives reconcile with your supposed core belief of loving people? This takes some work to reconcile and will likely be challenging to implement. So, in general, what all of this information translates to in real life for many Christians who attend conservative Christian churches nowadays is that they find comfort in the non-contradictory opinions provided by like-minded individuals who support one party, generally Republican. These Christians do not want to consider different or opposing political points of view because those points of view may not conform to their pre-existing biases. So, a possible reason that you may not want to consider what I am talking about in this series of videos is that I take positions that are not in line with your political beliefs, church, culture, or denomination, among other things. Now, let me reiterate something here. Confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance are very human tendencies and not necessarily Christian attitudes. This, of course, means that it is not just Christians that might be engaging in these tendencies. These are tendencies for nearly everyone at some point in his or her life on earth. So, I want to clearly emphasize that I am not singling out the Christian alone here. However, since the series of videos are directed primarily toward the conservative Christian, I do want these fellow Christians to be aware of this potential bias that does not serve God or the gospel well. Christians should keep in mind that there is a natural variety built into humanity, including Christendom, which has myriads of denominations, opinions, and expressions of faith. Let us remember what the Bible says. 1 Corinthians 12:15, in this case the New International Version, says, "If the foot should say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. Likewise, we should not be so easily inclined to dismiss the differences of opinion within the Christian body as being unchristian simply because they don't agree with a specific person or party in national, state, or local politics. As 1 Corinthians 12:12-14 says, "Just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free. And we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many." So, with regard to political polarization in particular, let us remember that political polarization is about feelings, not facts. Don't consider opinions because they agree with you, or because they are in the Christian family, or because they share your political beliefs. Consider opinions, even from the other opposing political side, because there is always the possibility that you could learn something new and true. We shouldn't be thinking along the lines of CNN is wrong because they disagree with me or us or our president or our political party. Rather, we should be thinking along the lines of CNN, or for that matter Fox News or any other news source, may be wrong in a specific instance because their facts are wrong. And yes, CNN may be wrong from time to time, and yes, their reporters, being humans, may engage in confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those reporters are intentionally trying to spread falsehoods. So, dear Christians, we should not be looking for yes people in our lives simply because they appear to validate our thoughts and opinions about certain matters. We should be looking for truth. Truth at times means that we are wrong. Yes, including me. At other times, of course, it will mean that we are right. This means that we don't elevate our feelings or our loved ones' feelings or our denomination's feelings or our culture's feelings as the most important thing when determining the correctness of a certain position in life. No, this means that truth is paramount and we are all subject to that. Once we do that, once we place truth above our feelings, we start to remember one of the most basic principles in Christianity. We humans, not just Christians, are a fallen race of people. Like Adam and Eve, we are prone to falling for lies and deceit, and we all have a long way to go. I am not saying that we should disregard our feelings or someone else's feelings. That would be an unhealthy and unchristian thing to do. I am, however, suggesting that we remember that Christians, like everyone else on earth, are also humans, and that we should continue to be in pursuit of what is correct and true, and not settle for the easy choice of only keeping the company of those who agree with us.